Welcome to episode 4 of the Panthers Movie Den. Today we'll be talking about Wes Anderson's new movie, The French Dispatch. It was supposed to come out in October of last year, and it's a self-described love letter to journalists in which Anderson takes the viewer on a 3-story journey about war, crime, love, humor, and everything in between, which all takes place within the pages of a newspaper titled The French Dispatch. I won't name the whole cast because they'll be here for a week, but some of the stars include Bill Murray as the editor of the paper, Benicio del Toro as self-proclaimed tortured artist, Timothy Chalamet playing a French revolutionary, as well as Adrien Brody, Frances McDormand, and others. So when I go into a Wes Anderson movie, it's just always great to see the staples of a Wes Anderson movie returning. Primarily Adrien Brody, Jason Schwartzman, who's only in this movie for like a minute at the end, but still. Owen Wilson, Bill Murray, and it's so interesting to see how well they fit into his style. It's almost as if you couldn't watch his movies without them in it, because at least if you've seen all of Wes Anderson's movies like I have, you're just tailored to see them deliver Wes's dialogue. And I say even if you're not necessarily a fan of Wes Anderson's movies, I'd say that you can acknowledge how perfect these actors are for the movie. So I think it's such a unique type of writing style that Wes Anderson has, and dialogue between the characters is, like everyone says, quirky, but in my mind it's more than just that, because it's almost like it's a storybook, because that's how you're looking at it also, but that's also how the characters speak to each other. It sounds like a storybook. Now, when talking about this movie, I think that French Dispatch, among his other movies, is right about in the middle of how I'd order them from favorite to least favorite, personally. I mean, this is Wes Anderson at his most Wes Anderson.
Yeah, for sure.
And this goes without saying that it has a signature flair, both in the look, dialogue, and characters. But as a whole, I think the movie is a bit unbalanced in parts. Even though I like the movie a lot, just because it's always so enjoyable for me to watch Wes Anderson's movies. And despite how much I like the idea of this movie's narrative being structured as if it was in the pages of a paper, I think that there are clearly some characters that were more interesting than others.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like for me at least, I think it started off really strong. I was really liking like the first half.
Yeah, I agree.
And then I feel like it did go down a little bit towards the second half of the movie. It did get a little more slow. And I definitely think the first half was much more interesting. But I really liked a lot of the ideas. I really enjoyed it overall. But I definitely think that the first half was much stronger than the rest.
Yeah, I agree with that. In my opinion, I think the first story introduced by Tilda Swinton's character about the jailed artist, again played by Del Toro, who gets the attention of Adrien Brody's character, was by far the most enjoyable, funny, and just memorable section of the movie.
Yeah, for sure. That was my favorite.
Even it was odd because even though it was the first third of the movie, I remember it's so much clearer than the last third of the movie, which I'll get to later. But a lot of how I feel about this movie can also be said for my opinion of the Chalamet-McDormand part, because Chalamet in this movie, he becomes like a Che Guevara-inspired character, though obviously more tamed, but comparable in the sense of his image being plastered all over, like Guevara after his attempt of a revolution. And I really liked his character as well. After this mark in the movie, I have to be honest in saying that I began to become a little uninterested and somewhat bored. And I honestly can't remember a lot of what happened in the third act of this movie. And I think that's saying a lot due to how much I enjoyed the first 2/3 of the movie. And I thought I would be on board for the last third, but for some reason, I don't know why. Except for the animated part, which kind of has stuck in my memory. Other than that, I can't really remember much of what happened with Jeffrey Wright's as author character, who I wish I could say I remember more about the story that revolves around him, but it's composed of scenes that he's explaining and it's illustrating what he's reciting from his books. And for whatever reason, it felt, I don't know why, I mean, obviously it's an entire third of the movie, but for whatever reason, it felt like it was tacked on. I don't know why.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like each story, I think it goes in order. First favorite, second one, second favorite, third least favorite.
Yeah, that's what I would say too.
Yeah. And yeah, the last one, I don't know, it was a little strange because the last one is in my opinion, nowhere near as memorable as the first two,
Mm.
and especially the first one. And it kind of feels like Wes Anderson could have done something a little better for the third one. I don't know. It feels like something is just missing from it, in my opinion.
Mm.
That there's some element missing to it because it's already like it should grab your attention. I mean, it's a kidnapping, and they're trying to find a way to rescue the kid, but I don't know. It just kind of fell flat for me.
Yeah, this section in particular also, it was more narration based.
Yeah.
And it had a lot of dialogue also, so that could also be a part of why maybe it was...
That's true.
Especially since at this point the movie was already starting to lose steam, in my opinion, especially after the second act, which was really interesting at the beginning, but towards the end you could see how... you could see towards the end of the second part how it was becoming the end of the second part. And then once you get to that point, it felt kind of odd to move right on to the third part because you felt like you just ended with something and now you're starting with something right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I don't want to say that this is half a good movie and half a bad movie, because it's not. It's just every single story has just this one quirk that ruins it. And I guess, like you said before, this is Wes Anderson's most Wes Anderson film. If you don't like Wes Anderson, you're not gonna like this. But, and I kind of want to agree with you on, yeah, it starts strong, but then slowly just runs out of steam. That's true and not true. Because, the first story dragged too long. The second one has this really irritating, camera work that's, in 2 minutes, but just is ultimately really, just not Wes Anderson, and just ruins the whole, scene. And the third one both drags and is, kind of confusing. And I would say that character development is really sacrificed in the name of in telling all these stories. And you can kind of tell that, Wes Anderson has the passion for it, and it definitely shows on the screen, but, I feel like the stories, especially the last third, needed to be tighter.
I definitely agree with that.
The stories needed to be... The first and third one especially needed to be, kind of shorter.
Was the shot selection or the camera work that you were talking about in the second one, is that when it was becoming... where they turned into color?
No, this is, when they're, fighting the French. When they're doing, it's after the chess thing, and they're fighting about was Frances McDormand character an elitist?
Oh
Was it
yeah, I
black
know
and
what you're
white?
saying. Yeah,
Is it black and white, and then
Yeah.
the camera?
yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
When it was the three Timothy Chalamet, Frances Dorman, and the other girl, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying from there, and also what you were saying about the first act and the third act being cut down. I do agree with the third one, just because of what I said. Notwithstanding the short runtime of the movie, it can feel slow at times, which is odd because it's just over an hour and a half, I believe, and that's mostly because of how energetic the first stories feel in comparison to the third one. I think to the latter third of the movie, but I do have to praise Wes Anderson in regard of no matter how many stylistic changes there are in this movie, with the aspect ratio, the color change, or even the setting, because there are major changes in all of those throughout the movie, but the movie never really felt all over the place to me. For someone whose movies are always uniform, like Wes Anderson's, in many ways, it's admittedly not easy to see where he's going at some parts. But again, in this movie, and I think that the nonlinear narrative that he'd structured for this movie could have made things feel, again, all over the place. But in all, I think that it just felt slow at times when it could have been more interesting, because especially, again, I just keep coming back to the third act, because I think that one stands out so much more than the other ones. The other ones are also just much more creative to me, and I think that he was aware of that, especially when making it. I think that's why he threw in the animation portion also, just because the first two had characters that, at least in my opinion, were much more memorable
Yeah.
So I think that he recognized how the third act was a bit more slow and, like I said, more dialogue based, just a narration throughout the whole thing. But again, all of his movies, and especially all the scenes in this movie, are all very heavy in dialogue. But it's just the third act that was a bit more heavy-handed in the narration, which could have made it feel like you're reading a book, which to many people watching the movie could be a bit bland.
Yeah, for sure. Like I really loved the first story so much. Like that one I remember very well.
Yeah, I would actually say like I loved the first story.
It it was so funny to me because like I'm into art, so a lot of the things were really funny to me, and it's just so entertaining to me, the whole first story, and I really like the performances in that first one a lot.
Yeah, I think
I want to say it as simple as I can, to try to shape it into words, the feelings in my heart.
I don't love you.
What?
I don't love you.
Already?
Already what?
Already? How do you know that? How can you be sure so quick?
I'm sure.
Ouch. That hurts me. The cruelty of it. The cold-bloodedness.
You said what you wanted to say. I tried to stop you. That's it.
I said part of what I wanted to say. I was in the middle of it. There's more.
No.
No what? Will you?
No.
Will you
No.
marry? Will you
Devrais-je te
marry
mettre
me?
dans ta camisole, te force, te ramener dans ta cellule et t'enfermer de nouveau?
I'm gonna need art supplies. Canvas, stretches, brushes, turpentine.
What do you want to paint?
The future. Which is you.
Yeah, I think Adrian Brody is. I always love Adrian Brody in Wes Anderson's movies, but in this one, I think again he played a really interesting character, and I liked him a lot. Especially that one favorite line that I liked, where the title card shows 3 weeks later, and then he says or 3 months later, and he's face to face with Benicio del Toro, and he says it's 3 weeks later. He just says it outright to him.
Wait, didn't he say years?
I
thought
don't
he
know.
said years.
It was one of those.
Yeah.
But either way, it was funny.
Yeah, and then he's like, "I need another."
Oh
year.
yeah. Oh yeah. It was
Yeah.
definitely a year because then
Yeah,
he said,
yeah.
"I need another year."
Yeah.
Adrian Brody started screaming.
That is the one part I remember from that.
I don't know, I thought it was pretty funny, that whole shot where he's like chasing her in the wheelchair.
Yeah.
I really like in most of the fight scenes how like still and story like they look. Like
Yeah.
all like perfectly staged. And I like how you see them like move just a little bit and stuff. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that's the thing about a lot of Wes Anderson movies, that I think this what sets it apart of whether you like him or not is the style and
Yeah.
how set up it is, like you said, Gary, how it's staged. And I think that's something, even though I have such a weird relationship with Wes Anderson movies, because I wouldn't say that I love a lot of them, but I love his style, and it's just really enjoyable to watch.
Yeah.
But
definitely.
the one movie I would say I love from Wes Anderson's catalog would be Grand Budapest Hotel. And the other ones I like. I don't think I dislike any of them. The only one that I really, which is kind of obvious, a lot of people disagree with me on this, is that I think Rushmore and Bottle Rocket are his worst movies. Not that they're bad, but I would say that they're his worst
Bottle
movies.
Rocky, yes. Rushmore, no.
Yeah, and I expected that from Rushmore. I know Bottle Rocket was his first one, so that one might not be as controversial, but Rushmore, I'm just not a big fan of. I couldn't really feel a connection to Jason Schwartzman's character in that movie.
Isle of Dogs is fantastic. Mr. Fox is stellar, and Grand Budapest is fantastic.
Yeah, I really, my favorites are Grand Budapest and Fantastic Mr. Fox. Those are my favorite.
I think that a lot of people who watch Wes Anderson movies or have seen all of his movies put The Life Aquatic at the bottom half of when ranking his movies, but it's like my third favorite of his 10. I think that movie is pretty underrated just because of how much it gets hate a lot. And World of Tenenbaums is another one where I liked it, but not as much as other people. But again, I really enjoyed just watching all those movies. Same thing with Moonrise Kingdom. It's a Moonrise Kingdom, which I liked more just in a general
Moonrise
sense.
Kingdom's alright.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it more in a general sense, more not just as a Wes Anderson movie, but as a movie by itself. I liked it a lot.
I'd say for me, French Dispatch is like somewhere around the middle, I would say.
Mhm.
Or like leaning more towards the top, I think.
Yeah, I think where it lands on yours and my list towards the middle is really telling in how much the movie itself, like you said at the beginning, Nick, I think it's true, even though you said it's half true. I think it really is true. I was half a good movie and half a bad movie. But I wouldn't even call it. I wouldn't call it bad though.
Yeah, me neither. I wouldn't.
The first half was I loved it. I really enjoyed it. But the second half, again, it just lost steam, and I felt it was the obviously much weaker portion of the movie.
Yeah, definitely.
The French Dispatch is clearly Wes Anderson's most it's
Self-indulgent.
yeah. It's also something that you kind of have to be on board with.
Yeah, from the beginning, I definitely agree with that.
And it's kind of like he's kind of making this for himself and doesn't really care what other people think. So when it lands, it really lands, but there's parts where it doesn't stick.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to describe the movie as a whole, where it lands. Because where it lands, I think that it really achieves a lot. And out of his movies always have really funny moments. But I think this was one of his funniest movies, especially with. And the first story is the more just looking at it on the surface, the funniest part. But I think that the second part, the dialogue is really funny.
Yeah.
Like with Timothée Chalamet especially. I think it's really well written. The way that Timothée Chalamet delivers the dialogue also, and Frances McDormand, I think they play off each other really well.
I'm naked, Mrs. Cremens.
I can see that.
Why are you crying?
Tear gas. Also, I suppose I'm sad.
Please turn away. I feel shy about my new muscles.
Go tell your parents you're home. They're worried.
I'm expected back on the barricades.
I didn't see any barricades.
Well, we're still constructing them.
Uh-huh. What are you writing?
Our manifesto? I told them not to invite Paul, by the way. Maybe you're sad, but you don't seem lonely to me.
Exactly.
I saw you at the protest on top of a bookcase taking notes. Is there a story in us? For the people of Kansas?
Maybe.
Then you should study our resolutions. Or anyway, will you proofread it? My parents think you're a good writer.
Give it to me. It's a little damp.
Physically or metaphorically?
Both, based on the cover and the first 4 sentences.
Don't criticize my manifesto.
Oh, you don't want remarks?
I don't need remarks, do I? I only asked you to proofread it because I thought you'd be even more impressed by how good it already is.
Let's start with the typos.
And I think that portion was, again, a really good half of the movie. And just the chess pieces and the chess game they were playing, that it's such a Wes Anderson thing, but if it also feels, like I said, it always feels like it's a storybook. Just looking at it, like when you look at the frames that he constructs, it's always, or for the very majority, most part, it's against a 2D background, which is something that he kind of went away from in this movie at some portions, like you were talking about towards the end of the second part, Nick, where it was the 3 characters talking to each other close up, and some of them are on an angle, which is not typical to see from Wes Anderson's method of framing. But I think that this movie definitely, it's I was just really happy that I was able to see this in a theater, because I always wanted to see a Wes Anderson movie in a theater, and I think that could also contribute to how much I like this movie, and maybe I liked it more than I would have if I seen it at home just because I saw it in the theater. Just because his movies, there's something that it's such an enjoyable thing to look at, and I think seeing it in the theater, it's unlike anything else.
Yeah, I was about to say that seeing it in theater was it was a great experience, because again, that was like my first one, and it just feels so. It feels like magical almost, like seeing these really cool shots and frames. on the big screen, and it's so pretty to look at. And I've really had a really fun time in watching it in theaters. And I just love how it really, like you said before, makes you feel like you're in a storybook. Because every frame, it seems like there's a lot of care into it,
there's always
a lot of detail.
Yeah, a lot of detail and
And
care put into it.
I feel like whenever I'm watching one of his movies, I always feel like I would find this as a book in like Barnes and Noble and just like open it and read it.
That's exactly
Like,
what I was gonna say.
yeah, like I feel like it's perfect. I love his style very much, and another thing that I really love too is that you always know that it's him. Like it's so stylized that you automatically know it's him. It's like Tim Burton. Like if you see something,
Yeah.
it's like you know. So I definitely recommend seeing this in theaters or any of his movies in theaters.
And whenever I'm going into a Wes Anderson movie, I always have such a weird feeling because I always expect it to be. It has a family movie. It has a family movie tone to it, and the look of it obviously is very much like. I mean, keep saying how many times I'm going to say that looks like a storybook, but when you watch the movie, there's always like 5 swear words just put in there that are unexpected because the rest of the movie,
Like random nudity.
yeah. So, some of that is pretty
Yeah.
jarring, but just because the rest of the movie is very.
And it's always like formatted like a children's storybook.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
trying to say, yeah.
So I always forget that they're rated R most of the time.
You would think at least like PG-13, but
Yeah.
there are times where it's rated R like this movie.
Like naturally, whenever I think of Wes Anderson, I just associate him with Fantastic Mr. Fox. So like I always forget that, that like most of his movies are not at all like that.
Don't buy this tree, Foxy. You're borrowing at 9.5 with no fixed rate. Plus, moving into the most dangerous neighborhood in the country for someone of your type of species.
You're exaggerating, Badger.
I'm sugarcoating it, man. This is Bogus, Bunce, and Bean, 3 of the meanest, nastiest, ugliest farmers in the history of this valley.
Really? Tell me about them.
All right.
I also assume that a lot of people who just watch the trailers and see it as a commercial, they'll be really confused going in. Just because
Yeah.
like Owen Wilson and people like that, you don't expect it to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
Though I did not see Luke Wilson in this movie, which is probably the one person who he forgot.
And Jeff Goldblum.
And Jeff Goldblum,
Yes.
who I think he would have worked really well, especially in the
Yeah, I
newspaper
think
portion.
he really would,
I think he
yeah.
would have been a good part of the newspaper. I could have seen him with Bill Murray. I don't know if he shared any scenes with Bill Murray.
I created this article for you.
Oh, that's it.
Bill
I
Murray
really-
also, I always forget that he's in some of his movies. Like in Royal Tenenbaums, when I was watching it, there was like 7 parts where I just forget he's in the movie. Then he shows up and I
Yeah.
keep getting reminded.
I really love seeing Bill Murray too. Like,
All right, let's be honest. Wes Anderson is keeping Bill Murray and Adrian Brody like in movies.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure. I mean, that's Bill Murray's whole thing. He doesn't have an agent or anything.
Yeah.
So, but he said that if Wes Anderson calls it, he's going to say yes to his movie.
By this time, he just sends a message, says, will you be available the first week in February? That's all. It's like Mission Impossible, if you choose to accept.
Right. Is there any universe where you say, you know what, Wes, I can't do this one, or is it an automatic yes for him?
It's an automatic yes. He's made making movies his life, and making movies is a joy.
he's always enjoyable to watch in his movies.
I just think Bill Murray should be in at least a minute of every movie. Like how he's in Space Jam. He should just be that, but in every movie.
Yeah.
It'll make
That would
every
be
movie
great.
better. Just find 30 seconds to a minute to put Bill Murray in there. Same thing with Little Shop of Horrors, which I watched not too long ago. Bill Murray just shows up out of nowhere. It just makes it that much more enjoyable.
Like, whenever I watch a Wes Anderson movie, it always feels like I get this, warm, cozy feeling, almost. Like, if I was reading a book with, like on a nice fall day, I don't know, like at a Barnes & Noble, something like that. I don't know how to describe it. It always just makes me feel good. And I mean, despite like all like the story flaws and issues with the film itself, I still just love the style, and I think that really helps a lot with his movies, even if there's obvious criticism.
I think looking back on The French Dispatch, when I watch it, when it comes out on Blu-ray or whatever, if I rent it from the library and just watch it at my house, I think that I'm going to like it somewhat less, just because that always happens to me whenever I watch a movie in the theater. Whenever I watch it afterwards, I feel that I don't like it as much. But with The French Dispatch, I think that I'll also go in. This is another benefit of that, though. Despite me feeling like I like movies less when I watch it after the movie theater, I think that I'm going in knowing what I'm getting. So when the third act comes around, I think I'm going to know. And I think that's also something that was a good choice for Wes Anderson to do when he put the page numbers, so you can kind of know how long it's going to be. That also helps. Mm-hmm. But I think going in, when I eventually rewatch this sometime in the future, I think that I'm going to like it significantly better in some parts, but not as a whole. I still think I'm going to like it as a good, solid movie, which I currently think it is.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. One thing I want to point out, I really love the scene. It was like really early on in the movie where the waiter was walking up the house, and you just see like that was so satisfying.
Yeah, that was very Grand Budapest-esque.
Yeah. I thought about that too. That was one of my favorite shots from the whole movie. Just like the waiter walking through the whole house. That was really nice.
And I think why I liked a lot of parts of this movie was also because of the fact that it has a little bit of a bigger scale than his other movies. And that's the primary reason why I think Grand Budapest Hotel is his best movie, is because the scale is very large.
His most accessible film, but it's also his most action-packed and like funny.
Yeah.
And also they go like on the train and all that, and they go into different parts. There's different settings in this movie, unlike something like Moonrise Kingdom, which is pretty much just in a camp. And even though there's a lot of action towards the end of that movie, again, it doesn't feel as much of a movie that everyone can enjoy as much as Grand Budapest Hotel does. And I think Grand Budapest Hotel also has the best acting in all his movies also. Even though the cast is not as... Even though, of course, there's a lot of great actors in that movie, it's not as stacked as if you were to look at, say, like the poster of World of Tenenbaums or something, where you see Gene Hackman and Luke Wilson, Ben Stiller, and all those guys, Gwyneth Paltrow, all of them. But I still think that Grand Budapest Hotel, it's like you said, Nick, it's the most accessible and also successful of his movies.
Yeah, definitely. I really enjoyed the concept too of The French Dispatch. I thought it was, I like how it's a clear, like you said before, love letter to journalism, and I really like that, because I haven't really seen a movie really focusing on journalism all too much. The only thing I can think of is Spider-Man, the Daily Bugle. That's all I can really think about. So,
sorry to all the journalists out there.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm some sort of a journalist myself.
So that's just what you view as old journalists. You just view old journalists as J.K. Simmons.
Partner, hello, you're fired.
Why?
Dogs catching frisbees, pigeons in the park, a couple of geezers playing chess.
Boss.
Not now.
I was thinking maybe the Bugle could show another side of New York for a change.
Now. We got 6 minutes to deadline, Jonah. We need page one. I don't pay you to be a sensitive artiste. I pay you because, still not now. I pay you because for some reason that psycho Spider-Man will pose for you.
Spider-Man won't let me take any more pictures. You've turned the whole city against him.
A fact I'm very proud of. Now, get your pretty little portfolio off my desk before I go into a diabetic coma.
Boss, your wife's on the line. She says she lost her checkbook.
Thanks for the good news.
Mr. Jameson, please, isn't there any of these shots you can use? I really need the money.
Oh. Miss Brandt?
Yes.
Give me a violin. 5 minutes to deadline, Jonah.
That's all I think about. Like, I feel like I've never seen another movie about journalism, so it was actually fun. Like, it was a unique concept, in my opinion.
I think that's also something that everyone, even if they don't like his movies that much, that they can respect that Wes Anderson is unique and how he's dedicated to his certain kind of craft, where he makes movies very uniform, like I had said before also. So that'll do it for episode 4 of French Dispatch. See you later.
See you next week.
J'avais dessiné sur le sable son tout visage.